So if you've been paying any attention, Lost Ark had recently had its summer 2023 Low-On event, and the most recent one that we've just had a couple days ago was not very well received by both KR players and NA players. Some reasons overlap for both regions. Some of them are more region specific, like for NA it's more of like a homework issue. For KR it was much more of a content drought issue, and once they mind fucking coming out, we're bored, we're not doing anything, we've got nothing to do. But I mean, the homework issue does still overlap. It's just the priorities are slightly different. Because of the terrible reception of it on both sides, Invin pretty much imploded on itself, and a lot of the top KR streamers actually switched over to playing MapleStory. They've had an update recently, so all of that combined kind of forced Smilegate's hand to announce somewhat of an emergency live stream. They've done one of these live streams before, however, that previous live stream didn't have many eyes on it because, well, it wasn't following an absolute disaster of an event, so people didn't actually realize this. So because of that, a lot of people were kind of expecting this to be a Loa-On Reloaded, Loa-On 2 type of event. It's not. It was always meant to be less than 1 hour for sure, just like the last one. And to give you an idea, in the last stream that they did like this, they clarified a few details about Voldyke and they announced Ebony Cube. That's where people found out the information about Ebony Cube coming without any official patch notes or anything like that. But this one obviously had many more eyes on it. It was in a much bigger spotlight for both regions. Because it was directly following everything that happened during Loa-On Summer and all of the disappointment that people have had with it. So what did they talk about? Well, the summary is not much. It wasn't much. I think the majority of things that were said during this live stream, which was about 20-ish minutes, was that they're sorry. I think I counted at least 4 times of them saying we're sorry on different parts of the stream. The developers looked really uncomfortable, to say the least. It looked like there was a gun somewhere off screen, off the frame, and they were just forced to sit down and apologize to the player base, and they looked like they just wanted to get this shit over with and get the hell out of there. And honestly, part of me doesn't really blame them because the backlash has been, well, it's been a time. They opened it up with addressing that the way that they've presented the Loa-On Summer was pretty much bad. They apologized for some of their wording. Apparently, one of the developers actually called Soul Eater Slayer by accident because they were really nervous during the presentation, and he apologized profusely for it. And it was funny to me because it's not like people don't really care about that. At least I didn't. So they said that the event itself was very underwhelming, and they should be able to do better in the future. They felt really bad for the mistakes that they've made in regards to the game leading up to this Loa-On, as well as just the Loa-On event on its own. They have been kind of going down gradually in quality, not to, you know, ride Gold Brewer's dick or whatever, but earlier ones have pretty much convinced a lot of people that Lost Ark is going to be an amazing game, which I think in many ways it is, but in many ways it no longer is anymore. They've went on to talk about the Tier 2 materials and how they don't want people who have Tier 2 materials to kind of miss out. So it was a minor point of it, but they talked about how the Tier 2 materials can now be converted into Tier 3 materials. I think the biggest thing that they wanted to talk about in terms of what the KR player base specifically cared about was Thaymine, because KR has been going through a drought, so they said that Thaymine is going to come out at some point in September, but they didn't give us a date or any of the item levels for it. They did say that Thaymine officially should come out on September 13th for Korea, and the item levels for it are going to be 1610 for normal mode and 1630 for hard mode. Initially, they were planning to release Thaymine in the summer for Korea, but they've faced a few difficulties that they didn't go into too many details about, and instead of having their initial plan of releasing Thaymine in August, they have had to push it back to September. So they also talked about how they want to change up some of the playstyles for some of the classes. They touched on entropy. They mentioned entropy, but they didn't talk about anything specific in regards to entropy, so that made me a little nervous. I broke a sweat a little bit because I have played 5 entropy characters. I don't want them to mess with it too much because I'm pretty happy with the way it is. They touched on it very briefly and it wasn't very clear as to what they meant, but they want to mess around with kind of how the characters play and how the characters feel while you're playing them. I don't know, just it's not like they're going to ever listen to me, but maybe putting a cooldown on how many times the boss can switch aggro and spin around, or not giving them a bunch of instant cast backstabs would be a good start. Or, I don't know, having the script not push itself into a wall and then put their back towards the wall would also, I think, vastly improve the entropy experience. One of the things that I want to say that I told you so, that a lot of people in my chat liked to point out to me that I was apparently very wrong about, is that Chinese development did actually affect some of their efficiency in terms of pumping out some of the content for KR and subsequently for NA. So they are actually very busy censoring skins for China, and it's true, and the developers said it themselves. So for those of you that were telling me that Smilegate has a separate department doing that and it wouldn't ever slow down their progression with releasing other content and developing other parts of the game, well, respectfully get fucked. However, they did promise that this is not going to affect anything in the future, and they are going to delegate or split up. I don't know if they're like towards the end of it, or I don't know how they're going to do it, but they did promise that it's not going to affect the development of the game at large anymore. So I don't know how they're going to tackle that, but the promise was there. Moving forward from Thamine, they've addressed the future of the game and the direction that the game is going to take. They did say that they're going to speed that up. That is something that is a heavy concern in Korea right now. And to put your hearts at ease, don't worry. That doesn't mean that things are going to significantly speed up for us. And the reason for that is because the game has been out for us for about 1.5 years, and the game's been out in Korea for 4 years. So pretty much, bar season 1, because we didn't get the game in season 1, we've gotten pretty much nearly 3 years worth of content within 1 year. So yes, North America has been kind of much more rushed in terms of how often things are coming out. I mean, a lot of people were very anxious about a con coming out in August. So I do think that the concern is valid, but I don't think that means we're gonna get even more rushed, because now we have Kayangle, then we're gonna get a con, then we're gonna get Valdike, and we're pretty much there. Like we are very close to being caught up, or very closely behind Korea. So it is actually good for both of us, because the reason why we've been feeling really burnt out and we've been feeling really anxious, part of it is because we have to catch up to raids much faster, because they're trying to put content out at a faster pace than KR, because we need to catch up. It's never fun playing from behind, and even though we're never going to get raids at the same time as KR, it is better to be a couple months behind KR versus like half a year to a year behind. So they've been trying to catch us up. However, we're pretty close to getting to that point where the next raid for KR will be the next raid for us, more or less a couple months difference. So I do think overall their plan for the future of the game to increase the pacing of vertical content progression, specifically like the raids coming out and how often they come out, I think that's a good thing for both sides, because we're not quite there yet, but we're gonna take some time to get there. We're not that many patches behind anymore, and we're going to keep getting closer and closer, and then by the time that KR is getting Thamine, they're getting Kazaros and whatever the hell is after that, we are going to be very close behind them, so we won't get the same feeling of like being rushed. We're going to be on a very similar schedule to KR, so I think personally that's a good thing for both sides. They did talk about daily chores. I want to emphasize that they just didn't have anything specific to say. This was in their closing statement. They asked for players to put a little bit of trust in them. They looked very apologetic. I mean, listen, it didn't feel very good watching this stream, I'm going to be honest, with just how sad and apologetic these 3 guys looked. Like, I felt genuinely bad, even though I wasn't one of the people yelling at them. They looked very apologetic, and they said, please trust in us a little bit and we will figure all of this stuff out. And they said, yes, we are aware of the daily chores. We are aware of everything you guys are talking about. So even though we just talked about Thamine and we just talked about like the general vertical progression, that is the #1 glaring issue in KR right now, so that's what they addressed. they are aware of everything else. So that doesn't mean that they're just focusing on this. They are aware of it, and they are asking for our patience, and they are asking for our trust in them, that they will tackle this and they will get it fixed, and they will implement something that will maybe make the players happier. They closed off by promising that they will no longer make excuses for themselves, even though that whole stream was them pretty much making excuses for Thaymine, making excuses for like Loa or whatever. They said, yeah, we just made a bunch of excuses, but we promise that we won't make any excuses again. We won't make excuses again, and we promise that we won't do that, and we promise better communication with the player base moving forward. So they are also promising to be more transparent and more communicative with obviously the Korean player base, but subsequently with us as well. So that was pretty much the gist of it. I didn't expect them to really fix everything in 3 days. It's been like, what, 3 days since Loa on Summer? I don't think in 3 days that they're capable of coming up with a list of things that they're going to fix that they will then promise and risk under-delivering, thus facing another backlash. I think what they did, pretty much, they tried to make something out of nothing. They gave us dates, they gave us item levels for Thaymine, and they gave us promises on not making excuses again, and increasing the pacing for vertical progression, vertical content coming out, which is really important for Kiara players, which is good. And they did say that they are aware of the issue with homework, and they did promise to take care of it and work on it, and they asked for our trust in them. I don't think they are in a position to ask for our trust personally. I feel like they're out of time to ask for our patience, because they were already given that without asking players. A lot of people were very understanding, and they said, hey, like, they're new to the position, they have to follow Gold River, which on its own is a very difficult thing to do, because people revered Gold River and he was a very loved developer, and it's a really tough act to follow. But I do think it's a little kind of, it's just, we don't really have a choice but to give them our patience and trust or whatever, because, like, what else can we do? And I'm not a proponent of saying the argument that a lot of people like to say, where if you don't like the game, then quit. A person is still capable of disliking certain parts about the game and liking the other parts, and I am that person. I want the homework to change, I want the raids to be nerfed to the previous raids so they are easier to enter for newer players, because that doesn't affect players like me who are doing endgame content on release. A lot of this stuff about Lost Ark I think could be better, but when I log into the game, ultimately I'm excited to play, and that's all that matters to me. And as soon as I don't feel that way, that's when I quit. So people are capable of caring about the game and enjoying certain aspects of it and wanting other aspects of it to change. So I'm not telling those people to quit, but the people who are completely fucking miserable in Lost Ark, or any other game for that matter, there's no reason to play a game that makes you fucking mad all the time, every single day. Which is how I differentiate doomers. There are people who give criticisms to the game that are valid, and then there are people who will never be satisfied and will always be mad. Those people are doomers to me. I don't know how you define doomers, but that's what I think of doomers, and I don't like people like that. I don't like those people who are just constantly miserable. They log into the game just to doom about it, make a bunch of doomer content about the game, but they've never said anything good about the game. Why the fuck are you even playing? Get the fuck out. Because you just go find something that makes you happy, because that is a miserable experience for not only for you, but for people who have to listen to you. My expectations were very low, and not because I'm like, oh, Lost Ark's dead, Lost Ark's done, that's it, we lost the Ark, we'll never find it, but because I think it is unrealistic to expect them to come up with a massive, in-depth list of things that they will change about the game in a matter of 3 days. This stream happened 3 days following Loa on Summer, and I thought it was just going to be a couple clarifications about certain things, and that's exactly what happened. Overall, this is one of those things where it's like, well, this could have been sent in an email, but I mean, I don't think the game is doomed. I think Lost Ark, I've always said this, I think Lost Ark has a really good base and a lot of really good things about it, but maybe the most recent backlash with how apologetic they seemed on the stream, with a lot of their wording, the apologies, the promises for no longer making excuses, asking players to put their trust in them, it kind of felt like they're asking for a last chance to me, like a big, like, allow us some time to prove to you that we're worth trusting and believing in. The culmination of everything that's happened in Lost Ark, they're kind of seeing all the backlash, they're seeing all of the consequences of everything, and they pretty much are starting to understand that they can no longer play things safe, because unless they make tangible big changes to the game that the players are asking for, the game will not stop dying. And the thing is that a lot of people back in the day, when I used to criticize the game and when I used to criticize certain parts of the game, people would always fucking come up with this white knight retort that's like, well, the game's still popular in Korea. The classic fucking,
actually, the game is still popular in Korea, so they don't need to change anything. If you don't like it, we're just the rest. We don't care about us. It's like,
okay, well, yeah, the game's now dying in Korea too. And I think now that they see it, maybe that'll give them the kick that they needed to be like, okay, guys, like, we gotta fucking do stuff and not just sit there and play it safe. And that's exactly what I was scared of, because I do think that if you give equal power to 3 people or 2 people, they're going to be much less likely to take risks, because if the risk backfires, it backfires on all 3 of them. Gold River took a massive risk reworking the game into Season 2. It could have backfired, but it paid off. But he's the guy that did it. He was going to be the guy to take the blame if Season 2 Lost Ark was even worse. He was going to be the only person people would laugh at and point fingers at, but when it succeeded, he is the guy reaping the benefits, and still to this day people ask for him to return. Do I think we need Gold River back? I don't think so. Because Gold River developed a lot of these systems that we no longer like anymore. I don't think we need Gold River back. I think that the developers need to understand that they can't play it safe anymore. And I think possibly they are at that point now. Do I think Lost Ark is doomed? Absolutely not. Because if Maple's story can come back from the grave and be as popular as it is today, so can Lost Ark. So let's hope that that means that the developers have finally gotten the reality check that they needed, and they are ready to take more risks, and they're ready to be more trigger happy with changes to the game that players have been asking for, quite frankly, a very long time. I'm still gonna play the game. Because I still like it. And ultimately, every single time when I launch the game, if I'm excited that I'm launching the game, I'm gonna keep playing it. This time next year, who knows? That'll depend on what happens in the future. So my attitude still is, regardless, Doomers out. Thanks for watching.